Hey, you guys, you are hanging with Langan. Welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here with me. You guys have been asking me, please continue bringing on my friend Peter Bales, the history professor and a comedian. He's both brilliant and funny. And you guys have been digging it. So I brought him back. He'll join us in a moment. First of all, though, we're using StreamYard now, and I'm really loving it. I want to give a big shout out to Bob Johnson. He is the owner of Bitten by a Zebra. It's a graphic and website design company, as well as he's a fantastic photographer. Everything from the most amazing headshots, outdoors, anywhere you want, relatively speaking. And he also does boudoir shots. So once this virus is over. So anyway, big shout out to him. We really appreciate it. Bittenbyazebra.com. All right, so you guys, I'll talk about more ways that you can support the show. You know, I have my new store, molangan.com. Just go to my website, and I have all the Don't Make Me Hate You products. You see my product placement over my shoulder. I also have things like, I had to show you this. Let me see what I can show you today. We have the masks, big hit. Big hit. You're out at the store, somebody doesn't have their mask on. You're like, don't make me hate you. Whatever, you know, walking through the neighborhood. And we also have t-shirts, don't make me hate you, tanks, all different types, baby onesies, all of it. It's really been quite a hoot. So you can go to my my store and everything will be there. Clocks, laptop covers, we got it all. So anyway, the Roaring 20s, that's what we're going to talk about today. It had a lot of depth and a lot of superficiality, seemingly. So who better to talk about it with us? We'll take your questions. Please send your questions. Just get on the .com. Head over to my, my group page, Hanging with Langan on Facebook. And also you can just ask your questions, share, watch parties, watch parties, watch parties. That's what really gets the numbers up and really grows the show. So do that for me because I do a lot for you. All right, without further ado, the PhD in history, a professor at Queensborough College in New York, and a comedian, Mr. Peter Bales. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Maureen. I am hanging with Langan. Great to be back.
Well, you know you are the official historian of?
I am the official historian of Hanging with Langan. So proud.
You should be. It's a big deal, mister.
It's on my CV.
All right. So here's the deal. I wanted to talk about the Roaring 20s, flappers, jazz, the Harlem Renaissance, prohibition. Let's talk about some of that.
Let's talk about the new woman. For the first time in the 1920s, hemlines for women went above the knee. Nothing like a mini skirt today, but they went above the knee. Women threw away their corsets. Have you ever worn a corset in your life?
Yes, that's my business, Peter. It's my business.
Well, they wore them every day, and they threw them away. Hemlines went above the knee. It became acceptable for women to cut their hair short because before the 20s, it was disreputable to have short hair, or makeup. And women started smoking cigarettes publicly in greater numbers in the 1920s.
Well, I will never cut my hair short because I look like Medusa screwed buckwheat. I have curly hair. If no, I blow dry it. That ain't never happening again. Ain't nobody got time for that.
But if you did, it would be respectable thanks to the 1920s and the changes the women made really for the first time. They were voting.
Precipitated that? What precipitated? Get the corsets off, cut the everything went shorter, the dresses and the hair. But what was that in response to?
Good question. The women's movement really, I believe, began formally in America in 1848 with something called the Seneca Falls Convention in upstate New York, when a group of women, some men, declared officially all men and women are created equal. And they fought for the right to vote, and they got the right to vote in 1920 with the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. And the progressive movement was spent after World War I ended in 1918. But by this time, the men came home, prohibition, that's depressing, went into effect, and women were willing to try new things. You want to know what happened that's very interesting is for the first time in the 1920s, your average working class guy could afford a Model T Ford car for under $300 in 1920s money.
Yes.
And that changed the nature of the relationship between men and women forever. The average guy now has a car.
But wait, I have so many questions. Okay, go ahead. Finish that thought. I have so many.
Okay. Well, and that meant that dating changed because before the automobile was common, a man used to pay a call on a woman. The man would go to the woman, knock on her door, her mother or the maid would answer, and you would say, "I'd like to pay a call on Maureen."
Yes, a lot of
you'd be off to the side, and if you really, really liked the guy,
yes.
you would signal to your mother or the maid to bring him in. But most of the time,
I wouldn't have
man had a business card and handed a business card to the mother, who put it in a fishbowl on a table by the door. And later on, the girl would decide who she wants to call and invite the man over to her house to pay a call.
Okay, now here what we're talking about here, Peter Bales, is you're assuming people had maids. This is very upper crusty people have maids. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know.
The middle class, I would say, through World War II, were able to afford household help. That's something quite different from today.
Really?
Yes.
Middle class people.
And yes, and the date was at the woman's house with the parents right there in the parlor. The automobile made it possible for the man to pick up the woman, take her somewhere else.
Screw her in the back seat.
Well, yes, guys would run out of gas. Every town got a lover's lane, and you begin to get drive-through attractions. The tunnel of love at the local carnival. Yes, that is true.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting to me, and I know you're a historian. What's always interesting to me, particularly as a woman, is birth control during different decades. And do you know what they used?
Well, Margaret Sanger was a great birth control pioneer who was harassed by the government relentlessly. And birth control in the 20s, a lot of it was simply making women aware of their own bodies and their own rhythms, and when they can get pregnant and when they can't get pregnant. I mean, you got to get to step one before you can get to step two.
Yeah, because it used to be the opposite when they thought women could get pregnant and not get pregnant.
Right.
That was good. That was good.
Yes. I mean, it's slow progress, but it is definitely progress. And of course, women voted for the first time nationally in the 1920s. And men were like, oh my God, they're going to vote for somebody because he's handsome. They're all going to vote for the same guy. Oh, what's just going to ruin everything? Well, it didn't. And you know what we learned from women voting? There is no national women's party. You know how women vote? Women vote like men. Some are liberal, some are conservative. Some care a lot, some don't care at all. And women do not necessarily vote for a female candidate.
Oh, don't we know that?
That's
But let me jump in too, because I had the honor of interviewing the great-great-granddaughter of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was a catalyst just a couple weeks ago, and it's on. People can see it on my YouTube channel, Maureen Langan, as well as Hanging with Langan group page. But what's interesting to me about that, I mean, she was the catalyst for all that, but this 100th year anniversary, God willing that I sound like my Irish mother, God willing, the virus is behind us. They're putting up the first ever real women statue in Central Park to honor the suffragettes. And they have, so Join a Truth, and then they have Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. There are no real women statues among all of them in Central Park. This is to commemorate the 100th anniversary. There's Mother Goose, there's Juliet, there's some nymphs, Alice in Wonderland. That's what we got. Anyway, back to you, Peter Bales.
Oh, it is long overdue. And those suffragettes worked tirelessly. They were brilliant writers, brilliant speakers. They didn't live long enough to see the 19th Amendment in 1920, but they saw that they were winning, and they did ultimately win.
But jumping in on that part, because you were talking about women voting, they'll vote for anyone. I don't know. I still think men will vote for men, women will vote for men, but I don't think as many men will vote for women. I still think there's that dynamic, though you see so many strong women now. What always has troubled me when you look back on the suffragette movement are the cartoons of these women, that these women are gonna, they portray them as like animals and overpowering and losing their femininity. And the women who were against suffragettes or suffragette, the right to vote. Those are the ones that always really surprised me. And it continues that way, in some ways.
Yes, I think you're exactly right. I think it's been under talked about that a lot of people didn't vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016 because she was a woman.
But she wasn't likable and she had email issues. Come on, Peter.
Well,
she was so brilliant.
Benghazi. But the truth is, I think Americans have not yet had acceptance of a female president. We have an African-American male president before we have a white female president even. We're behind other countries in the world on that. And I think it's certainly something that is very notable. I think it's terrific, by the way, that Joe Biden has committed to selecting a female vice president.
Is it terrific or terrific?
I think it's terrific. Terrific.
Yes, and forgive my ignorance if I am incorrect. I am a lover of the history. Thus, that's why you're here. But official historian, did African-American men get the right to vote ahead of white?
African-American men technically got the right to vote in the 15th Amendment right after the Civil War. However, in the South, especially, it was impossible for them to vote because of state and local laws that created a segregated society, Jim Crow laws, and prevented African-Americans from voting. Technically, it was on the books, and it was the responsibility of the federal government to enforce that after the Civil War. But in the South, particularly, African Americans could not vote, even though technically the 15th Amendment granted them the right to vote.
Well, that's what's interesting, too, to me, is Reconstruction. But that's another topic.
That's a great topic.
I know I have my book right there, my Reconstruction book. I have all the history books. I'm a loon. But pardon me, I have a bit of the allergies. People are loving this. If women, Myra Shannon says, if women showed their ankles, the men might get an erection.
I'll tell you something. A lot of men find a slit skirt to be sexier than a miniskirt.
Well, everybody has their own things. Some guys are butt men. Some guys like other things. I don't know what to tell you, darling. Oh, good. Hey, this is great. You guys were getting your messages here. We saw Peter at Governor's in Levittown. Funny guy.
All right.
Stuff. Hey, you guys, I'm so sorry about my allergies today. Time for a commercial break, Peter. I cracked myself up. Okay. Hey, you guys, pardon me. Today's show brought to you, sponsored by, I'm sorry, he deserves a non-coughed introduction. Bitten by a Zebra, Bob Johnson. I love this guy. He's done so much graphic work for me and headshots for me. You can see his work at my Facebook. Maureen Langan, Mo Langan, Don't Make Me Hate You. All of it, Hanging with Langan, all leads you to my website, and you'll see his work there. It's bittenbyazebra.com. Reach out to him if you need a graphic artist, a website designer, and a photographer. Great, great works. So anyway, you guys, getting back to this, we're speaking with I didn't even finish my commercial. Hey, everybody, Maureen, how do we support you? Oh, what do you mean? Do you mean go to my store that says my Don't Make Me Hate You store with all my items? Is that what you want to do? I don't blame you, but what can I get there, Maureen? Well, you can get any kind of t-shirt. We have tanks. We have classic. You can see there's a lot. We have, what else do you have? Oh, we have masks. Oh, look at that. Don't Make Me Hate You masks, because you don't want to hate people. They make you hate them. You start out loving everyone. It's what they do that causes you to hate them. You are a victim. Is there just one more thing that we can do, Maureen? Of course you can. Please forgive me. You can donate to support the show at paypal.me/Mo Langan or Venmo at Mo Langan. I got to tell you guys, you've been so supportive and the show is growing. I mean, we're getting great guests and you folks are following. Watch parties, watch parties, watch parties. That's how you can help me spread the word, get more support for great guests like Peter Bales. We're loving having him. We're talking, he's a professor of history, PhD. He's smarty pants. Teaches at Queensborough College. Is that in Queens or
the University of New York? Very proud of it. In Queens, part of the
Queens. I know Queensborough, but sometimes it can be in Long Island. Sometimes they give it a name. The other thing is he's a comedian. So here we are talking Roaring 20s. I'm
sure you still have nightmares about prohibition, given your predilection for alcohol.
I don't like this Irish stereotypes, Bales. I don't like the uptight wasp who never had sex in the backseat of a car had you been in the 1920s. All right.
You know what? A lot of the establishment wasps wanted to slap the wine and the beer out of the hands of the Irish, the Italians, the Greeks. That was part of Prohibition. I mean, trying to understand what happened. And the men came back from World War I, and you did what? We can't what? We just almost died for our country, and we can't get a beer? Well, that was part of it. Slapping alcohol out of the immigrants' hands. That was part of what motivated it. And also, a lot of white fundamentalist Christians wanted to keep African Americans from getting what they call beer muscles. You know, you drink, you might loosen up and demand something like equal rights.
Or not having a cop put a knee on your throat, stuff like that.
Yeah, stuff like that. Stuff like you might want to start bird watching in Central Park. Yes, I think that was part of Prohibition back in the 1920s. And of course, that led, without a doubt, to the rise of the mafia, which was much more small time before the coming of Prohibition. Somebody had to supply the illegal hooch that everybody wanted, and the mafia stepped right into that. Before that, they were running numbers, they were doing prostitution, they were doing protection rackets, but it was supplying alcohol to the thirsty masses that gave the mafia their big break. Bootleggers.
But you know, so when well, I do love, this is a topic I really love, that we're talking Roaring 20s. I love the whole Harlem Renaissance.
Yes.
And I live on the Upper West Side, not from, but it's just the history. You go to certain streets like St. Nicholas Avenue. There's different places. Let's talk about the Harlem Renaissance, the jazz, the music, the clothing, the whole thing.
Harlem, as late as the 1880s, was a white farming village. And by the 1920s, it's the center of Black culture in America. It's where Langston Hughes wrote his amazing poetry and prose. It's where jazz grew and grew and grew. And of course, jazz is uniquely American. It started in New Orleans and came up the Midwest, you know, Cincinnati, St. Louis, Chicago, over to New York with greats like Louis Armstrong and King Oliver. And then we exported jazz to the world. What a great American creation, jazz. And jazz was so central to America in the 20s, with of course the music, but then the dancing that went with it. It was so centered in Harlem in the 1920s. And the wealthy white people from downtown would love to go to the Cotton Club, right?
Yeah, up to the hipster place, yes.
Totally as hip as you can be, but then go back home at the end of the evening to their safe white neighborhood.
Yes, you have to do that. Jeez Louise. When did that start? What precipitated this change from the flapper, the fun? Well, we'll talk about the Depression another time, because I want to talk about the stupid fads that went on in the 1920s.
We could do a whole show on the Depression.
Yeah,
I try not to make it depressing. But
no depressing.
Yes, it was a whole new world from the 20s. The 20s, you know what? Sometimes I call the 20s a stupid decade, just the way I call the 70s a stupid decade. Let me explain.
Please do. This is hurtful stuff.
Americans were fed up and exhausted by the end of the 19 teens. World War I was finally over. They were promised a world that would be safe for democracy. Woodrow Wilson promised them that. By the early 20s, you can see that's not happening as Mussolini comes to power in Italy. So they're disappointed by their dreams they had for World War I. The progressive movement, which was such a great movement to bring greater equality and freedom to America, was spent by the end of World War I. And we enter into the 1920s, where people really want to party and forget. They want to forget.
I want to forget now.
They want to forget the marches that led to women's vote and all of the calls for a minimum wage and greater in the workplace. The 20s is very conservative in many ways in terms of government, but liberal in terms of social mores for women and the flappers and everything. I'll tell you something. The stupid fads, swallowing live goldfish, reading about the countryside, with a raccoon coat, 23 skidoo.
What is that? What is 20? Does that have to do with the Flatiron District in New York?
I really wonder. 23 skidoo.
I think it has something to do with, I don't know. This could be fiction, but I heard the 23 skidoo, and we'll find out next time you're on. Let's put a little.
And people spent weeks on the top of flagpoles to set the record. Why?
I'm down telling you about 23 skidoo, Peter. I had to tell you about 23 skidoo. I feel dismissed.
No, wait. What, you know the answer?
Well, I heard, again, I said it could be fiction, that the cops, like there was, I don't know if it was something about the wind was blowing up women's skirts or something down by the Flatiron District, something about the cops going, get out of here. Skidoo, it's because it was around 23rd Street, I believe. I don't know. We'll look it up, but that's all I'm
going to look it up. I will be responsible.
Yes.
I will look it up. The origin of 23
skidoo.
23 and me, 23 skidoo. I almost said 23 and me. But I do think there was hard partying, hard drinking. F. Scott Fitzgerald really hit the nail on the head with Great Gatsby. And I think people are trying to forget the hopes and dreams they had prior to the 1920s. That's
I know a lot about Fitzgerald. Sad. I said, poor Zelda Fitzgerald. Very
well, Zelda liked to party too, from what I understand. They were quite a couple.
They were a couple, but she had a mental breakdown. So you're talking about goldfish swallowing, the Great Gatsby, and you said the stupid fads, flagpole sitting.
Flagpole sitting, yes. Why? Why do you do that? Well, you do it just because it's silly and you want to forget and you want to set a record. Maybe in another show we'll talk about the 70s, and I'll say, why was there streaking? Why? There's no answer why. It's just, it was the time and it seemed like the right thing to do. And, they would spend weeks up there to set flagpole sitting records just to do it because it was a silly partying decade on the surface. Beneath the surface, you still have racism. You still have white poverty as well. Farmers really suffered in the 1920s. But again, that usually gets shifted to the back burner. Ironically, farmers are now using tractors much more commonly, and thus producing more food, and thus causing the price of food to go down, and they make less money because of tractors and advancement in farming. I'll tell you something. In history, the farmers are the canary in the mine. The farmers suffer first, and it's certainly true in the 1920s.
You know what's interesting to me when you look at history, and this is obvious, it's so obvious to you and probably most people, but it's not a trajectory forward. You go forward, you go back. You have the progression of the 20s. We're having issues today that they had in the 20s. Civil rights, poverty. I think women are coming up through the ranks, certainly politically. But we don't keep growing and evolving. We take 2 steps back and then forward, and then sometimes we go 3 steps back. Like the 20s looks like it was going to be open and progressive, and then that didn't,
Well, I like to think that we're making slow progress forward. I'm not African American, so I would like to think we're making slow progress. I'm optimistic. I mean, I wouldn't want to go. Would you want to go back and live in the 20s? Would you want to be? Let me ask you this: would you like to be rich in the 1930s? Would you like to go back in the past anytime and be wealthy over what your situation is today?
You mean like the 80s and be friends with Madonna and Cyndi Lauper? Is that what you're saying?
The 80s? Well, the 80s is almost current events for me. Would you like to go back to a time before the 1900s and be queen?
I just wonder what it's truly like living during those times, which is why I love finding people's personal letters or reading people's personal histories and memoirs. I love that stuff.
I'll tell you something. I don't want to go back to a time before antibiotics. I don't
want to go back to 2016. That's what I would like.
But the 1920s, there's so many great movies about how fun it was. President Calvin Coolidge's son played tennis on the White House tennis courts during Coolidge's term, got a blister. It got dirty. He didn't take care of it properly. It got infected. The infection spread to his vital organs, and he died.
Yeah, when did antibiotics come in?
The president's son died from a blister he got on the tennis court.
It was a wimp. Suck it up. It's a blister, dude.
I don't want to go back to a time when that could happen.
When was the antibiotics? I think penicillin, was that not the first antibiotic? I don't know.
Penicillin was the first antibiotic, and it's coming onto the table, I think, by the mid-30s. It's certainly available, thank goodness, in World War II. But
let's talk about movies too. Okay, go ahead.
It kills bacteria. You know, George Washington died of a strep throat. That's something that you get, and you get a pill, and it's gone in 2 days. We have to remember how fortunate we are today. That's why I believe we're making slow progress forward on most things.
Go ahead.
Maybe basic courtesy in politics.
You know what? I think another time we'll go. Maybe we will or won't. We'll go to the politics and the underbelly of the 20s, because we tend to stay. We're staying kind of light and fun here. But
President Harding died in office in the 19.
Did he have a blister?
No. You want to know what happened? He was on a train trip, the first president to travel to Alaska.
Yes. And
he was on a train trip, and he didn't feel well. And his White House physician, who was not a competent physician, kind of like today, a friend of the president, said, "You ate some bad seafood, just lie down." And it turns out the president had a heart attack, and they took him to San Francisco, where he died immediately when they reached San Francisco. He died in office, and they took his body across the country slowly in a black shrouded train. People lined the tracks, and something curious happened. When he left for the trip, nobody knew about all the Harding scandals. But when he got back to Washington, he was disgraced. And I think he was buried just in time, because you don't speak ill of the dead. But then all of the Harding scandals came out.
Before we get to the Harding scandal, so was it seafood poisoning? Do we know this?
Oh, he had a legitimate heart attack.
From the seafood poisoning?
No, I think just a heart attack. The seafood poisoning was a misdiagnosis.
Oh, because you shouldn't get it like on your way in the middle America. If you were going to eat seafood, you wouldn't want to get that.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was a heart attack.
It was a heart attack. Yes, it was. Followed by Calvin Coolidge, and then I'm going to quiz you. And
no, not on this.
No, and I'll give you a hint. Who followed Coolidge as president? Your hint is vacuum cleaner.
Hoover.
All right, you knew it. You knew it all along.
I didn't need a hint.
You didn't need the hint.
This is Peter Bales. He's a comic, and he has a PhD in history. He teaches at Queensborough College in Queens. Just let people know if they're just
tuning in.
And
there's no homework after this show. And my main message is, let's just have fun with history. Let's have some laughs with history, and let's support Maureen.
What is this? This is a commercial break, Peter.
Commercial break.
Hear ye, hear ye. All right. Hear ye, hear ye. Hey, just shout out to Bitten by a Zebra sponsoring the show. He's been sponsoring it for a while now. So grateful. Bitten by a Zebra, graphic artist, website designer, photographer. Thank you so much. Bob Johnson, that's his company. And if you want to support the show, let's have a banner here. Here you go. You can go to paypal.me /Mo Langan, Venmo @Mo Langan. You guys, I've been doing the show Monday through Friday, keeping them coming for you. Great guests like Peter Bales, the official historian of Hanging with Langan. I also have some great products, Don't Make Me Hate You clothing and items, because you don't want to hate people. They make you hate them. And there you go, Don't Make Me Hate You masks. We have onesies. We have clocks. We have shower curtains. The whole thing is hysterical. And if you want to check out the products, just go to my store. It's at the it's molangan.com store. All those Don't Make Me Hate You products, molangan.com store. All right, that commercial break brought to you by Bitten by a Zebra and me. All right, let's get out of this here. I'm using StreamYard, you guys. It's brand new to me and I'm very excited by it. And we're going to even grow it more and do more things. A lot of people watching, digging it. Thanks, you guys. Very good. I'm loving it. Yeah, we didn't get to the silent movies. People want to do that, but we're still on the politics. First Catholic president, not president, first Catholic to run for president.
Absolutely right. Governor Al Smith of New York. And he was the son of Irish immigrants, grew up in the Bowery, the Lower East Side, very proud of being Irish. And I'll tell you something.
Some people are, Peter, proud to be Irish. Imagine that.
Can you believe it? Some people are proud. He was very proud to be Irish. And New York elected him governor. And he was a progressive governor. And he had a heavy New York accent. And he wore a brown derby and smoked a cigar. And the Democrats nominated him for president in 1928. And when he ran nationally, there was so much anti-Catholic. The Protestants, the mainstream of the country back then, just could not accept, many of them, most of them, could not accept a Catholic president, a Roman Catholic president. There were rumors that he was going to get elected president and turn it over to the Pope. He was going to turn all public schools into Catholic schools, and he was going to cherish the Bible above the Constitution. It was all prejudice. Mm-hmm. It was horrible. In some places, the police, in Cincinnati, I believe it was, he was speaking at a hall during the campaign, and the police went down in the basement and turned up the heat. So it went up to 95, and he had to stop giving his speech. He took the train all over the place.
The Irish are very sensitive to the heat, just so you know. We are from a cool climate. And my mother is from Ireland, and her maiden name is Smith. Let's go.
Well, that's probably related. But the fact is, the economy was doing well. And I don't think he would have won anyway, because Americans don't change horses when the economy is doing well. So it was Republican Harding, Republican Coolidge, and then Republican Hoover. But the amount of prejudice against Smith because he was Catholic was off the charts. And we make slow progress because in 1960, there was still prejudice against Kennedy because he was Catholic, but he still barely won the election. And today, I think if a Roman Catholic ran for president, it would be a non-issue. That's what I'm talking about when I mean slow progress.
May I jump in here with Kennedy, because you mentioned him as the Catholic? My mother being from Ireland, being pregnant with my brother when Kennedy was assassinated, my brother's name is John Kennedy Langan.
Well, that's nice.
Because we had Jesus in velvet, no Elvis, and we had Kennedy in velvet on the wall. Right. Just so you know, that's all. So
your mom really was into Kennedy?
Well, yeah, I think there was a proud, Catholic.
Well, you should have. That was quite a thing, electing a Catholic president. And now the entire issue, I think, has disappeared. There's not a single Protestant, by the way, today on the Supreme Court. So I do think we make some progress.
That's an interesting tidbit.
For example, in the 1920s, if a Protestant guy met a Catholic girl, that would be a huge issue with the parents. And I think that was ending when you and I were young, but I think it's really ended now. I do think.
What about back in the day, like even in the 50s or well, forget interracial marriage. That was off the charts. But I mean, like off the table. Forget that. Right. But even like Italian, and we're talking East Coast here, but even like Italian, Irish, people wanted to stay with their own types in Manhattan and New York. Even today, some Jewish families don't want non-Jewish partners. And that I understand why. I mean, I understand all of it culturally or religiously, but it's just interesting how that's shifted and changed. I like that.
I understand it. I don't necessarily condone it. I think Protestants and Catholics have made progress in that regard and are ahead of some other races and ethnic groups in that regard. I don't think Protestants and Catholics would make a big deal. That's not a mixed marriage today. Back in the
I'll tell you something. I've been at a wedding with my father, Huey Langan from the South Bronx, and so a Presbyterian wedding, I'll tell you this quick story. My dad, Huey, you go to mass and he put a penny at the Catholic Church and all the 6 kids. So you put a penny or a nickel in each of your hand. And because, he can't, whatever, can't afford to give all these kids money. So he's like, yeah, just put it in the basket. They better hope it ain't going to Africa. I'm like, why? He goes, well, because when I was back in the South Bronx, the nuns told us to save our pennies, bring them into school so they can send them to starving people in Africa. Well, come on, think about it. It's been 30 years. The people are still starving. Somebody's stealing the pennies. Then we go to a wedding at a Presbyterian church, and he's like, I wouldn't put a dime in that basket. You know why? There's always a backstory. And I go, I don't know why. Go ahead. Because the Presbyterians, they killed the Irish, and they took our land. I'm like, yeah, but Dad, we live in New Jersey. So anyway, little Huey stories, little Huey stories.
Well, I mean, he was a man of his time, right?
Well, that's the whole thing. Even when you write about, I think what troubles me now is, of course, we've progressed. Of course, I hope we've progressed in a lot of ways. And in some ways, we still have a lot of work to do in a lot of areas. That's not what I'm saying. But in terms of the language we use, the way we refer to people or the times or just any colloquialisms then aren't now. But when you want to write a story about a real person and the real words they used, I mean, in my solo show, Daughter of a Garbage Man, I've had people come up to me, they go, well, I don't like that you use that word. I go, but that's the words he used. And I'm telling you the story about him. It's like they want to whitewash like they want to do to Mark Twain. Like you can't
right, good.
And get the history of those words and why, even if they're offensive, why were they used? What was the context? Maybe they were totally offensive. Maybe they were used as a slur. So let's reveal the fullness of a person. Anyway, that's me. I think.
What an example of an organization that remembers its history proudly, the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People.
Right.
That's the word that was used.
Why my father uses that. That's what I'm trying to say.
In the early 1900s, when the NAACP was founded,
right,
by whites and blacks together, including the African-American W.E.B. Du Bois, it was perfectly appropriate to use that term. And they're not going to change the name.
Well, they could.
They could, but they haven't heard that there's any movement to do that because it's out of respect for their history.
Well, I understand that, but I could understand if they changed it too. My niece, who just finished college recently, went for an interview with ARC. And she goes, Aunt Mo, do you know what that is? I go, yeah, it's the Association of Retarded Citizens. She goes, we don't use that word. I go, well, tell them to change their name. I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's what it's, I mean, I'm not going to go around saying it, but do you understand that's changed? That's
right.
Similar kind of thing. I don't know. You asked me to know what it is. I just told you I know what it is. Well, there's I'm just saying that's the name. I mean, don't blame the messenger.
Yeah.
What are we going to, you're going to come back next Thursday with me?
I'd love to come back.
What do we want to talk about next week? We can think about it, but there's always something.
Well, we're progressing sort of naturally into the Great Depression. And it was the bubble burst, Maureen. Bubbles always burst.
Bubbles always burst.
They were charging things in the 20s and let's just party like there's no tomorrow.
Let's party like it's 1929, not 1930. Right.
Right.
Or 1920. All right, so listen to me. Why don't you come back and we'll have fun again with you next Thursday. Same bat time, same bat channel. And you guys, I appreciate all of you supporting the show. Tomorrow we do Hell Gigs with Vinnie Mark, originally from Long Island. He's a comic, but he also books comedy shows. So I want to get his take on both sides, dealing with comics and being a comic. And we also have Barry Ribbs. Barry Ribbs, he's an older white gentleman, but there's this kind of little gangster thing with him. And I want to learn more about where that comes from. He's open for D.L. Hughley. It's interesting. I want to know more about him. He cracks me up. And you guys, I want to thank Bitten by a Zebra for supporting Hanging with Langan, website designer, graphic artist, photographer, Bitten by a Zebra. Bob Johnson is the owner of that. And one more time, if you want to support the show, I have a full line of Don't Make Me Hate You products. You can go to my website, Mo Langan, Maureen Langan, Don't Make Me Hate You. All of it takes you to my website. And if you want to support the show, every day I bring you a great show with guests like Peter Bales. And you can certainly go to PayPal or Venmo. I'll let it scroll. Look at this. I'm learning new technology. I'm going to keep getting better and better at this. I mean, this is the way it is now. This is StreamYard, much better than Venmo. You guys, you rock. Thanks a million.
23 skidoo.
23. Oh, yeah. Let's come back with what that really means.
We're going to look that up. Absolutely.
23 skidoo. And you guys, we got to skedaddle, but we will see you. And listen, I have all my interviews. I put them up on YouTube, but go to Hanging with Langan, join that group, and you will see, just scroll down, you'll see all the many interviews with Vic DiPotetto, Jessica Curson, Marion Groden, Bobby Collins, Tom Cotter. I mean, there's so many, Karen Bergreen, Veronica Mosey, Carrie Louise. Anyway, just a lot of great shows there. Peter, thank you.
Thank you, Maureen.
And all the best to you, honey.
Oh, you're great.
All right, bye. Mwah.
Mwah.